Renaissance, a word meaning rebirth, because that's exactly what it was for Europe. The Black Death was a horrifying period for all of Eurasia that killed large percentages of the population. But once the smoke cleared and the epidemic had ceased, there was a period of newfound hope and re-establishment of culture. The period succeeding the bubonic plague, which we now know as the Renaissance, brought us many new developments of thought, culture, and sciences. The Renaissance brought upon the Enlightenment due to the newfound push for change in the newly disrupted social structure created by the plague. Social thinkers in places such as France began to question political philosophy that spread throughout Europe and began to call for political change. And these critiques of the political systems during this period also began to bring more attention to the corruption of the Catholic Church, which would eventually lead to the Reformation. The Reformation then allowed for further advancements in the sciences in this period due to fear of religious punishment, such as being proclaimed a heretic, becoming lessened. And this also allowed for more advances to be made in chemistry, physics, general biology, and importantly, the study of anatomy. The developments in the understanding of anatomy that happened in the Renaissance allowed for a revolution in the visual arts. Before the Renaissance, human dissection was widely banned throughout Europe, and much of the widespread information on anatomy was based on the findings of Galen, a man who based his understandings of human anatomy widely on his dissection of animals. The rebirth of culture and science in the Renaissance allowed for the perfect environment for a new look at the study of human anatomy. This period brought us the incredibly important medical textbook that is De Humani by Vesalius. This was the first widely popular and acclaimed medical and anatomical text since the writings of Galen. Vesalius was majorly important because he was one of the first few anatomists of the Renaissance to hold his own dissection knife to a human cadaver, and he was able to make many nuanced observations and understand new details of the human body that were overlooked or completely missed by Galen in his observation of animals. This was one of the most major contributors to medical writing, but there are also many important artists that were also anatomists improving the period of study. One of these people was printmaker Antonio Poliano, who some describe as the first master to skin human bodies in order to better understand the human in nude form. Leonardo da Vinci is also one of the most important Renaissance-era anatomists due to his revolutionary studies and dissections. One of the ways he excelled in anatomy was by the range of his dissections, being one done on all ages, from fetuses to the elderly. This gave him an incredibly wide range of work that allowed him to best understand the human body and how it developed, giving him an understanding of the body that surpassed many professional anatomists. This understanding of anatomy changed the depiction of the human body in art. The use of the human figure is a major element in Renaissance art. The body has real form and looks like a real figure in the environment it is painted in. Look at these two paintings. Both of these depict the Last Supper, with one being from the medieval period and the other is painted by the incredibly famous painter and anatomist Leonardo da Vinci. These pieces will serve as great examples of the progression between the periods due to them displaying the same event, same people, and they both have very similar compositions. And yet, despite these similarities, you can clearly see how one is much better at displaying the human form. There are many elements in the anatomy of these pieces that show clear improvements, so I'll explain some of the specific comparisons. The hands are something that comes to mind very quickly. In the medieval painting, you can clearly see the hands are disproportionately thin, and they are incredibly stiff. The wrists bend in a way that no one puts their hand. And one of the hands in this painting can even be mistaken as being backwards because of how it's posed and drawn. Now, compare this to a painting by an actual anatomist. You can see how all the hands are better defined and more realistic. And also, despite all of the poses and gestures of this painting being much more extreme and theatrical, they still look so much better and so much more real. It's the same thing with the body posing in these. The angles of the backs and shoulders of the men in the medieval one don't match that of the necks and faces, causing not only for an awkward pose, but also for incredibly strange anatomy. But in Da Vinci's, you can clearly see that even with the more extreme and theatrical posing, these bodies still look correct and have the correct angles, anatomy, and proportions. This is because Da Vinci's vast understanding of anatomy and his wide range of grasp on it. If you look at many anatomical drawings made by Da Vinci during his dissections, you can clearly see how he applied these elements to his piece. Da Vinci wanted to paint this scene in a way of emotion that had never been done before, and you can clearly see this in how he effectively displayed his knowledge from his studies in the piece. And the same sort of thing applies to so many pieces of the Renaissance. The understanding of anatomy during this period brought a massive change in the arts due to the legalization of human dissection that happened between the medieval era and the Renaissance. More people being allowed to look at the human body led to more beautiful and accurate portrayals of it. Many artists applied and built on these principles. For example, Michelangelo and Da Vinci are credited with setting a new standard when it came to portrayals of the human form. Renaissance artists also, in general, developed a new vocabulary when it came to illustrating and describing the body in a medical light. Also, the book De Humani pioneered the use of detailed illustrations in modern medical works. In this image from the book, you can see this specifically. Not only is it a very effective display of the human muscular system, but it's also posed very theatrically and artistically. And it truly represents the blending of the study of anatomy and art in this period. You see, we can now easily see how the actual scientific study of anatomy connected to art, but also how it has a stylistic impact from just observation. This sort of idea came up in our discussion of Renaissance art. Knowing how the body works and how it's built allows you to do more with it. You can add more dynamics to your posing, and then add more emotion to the piece and give it a better flow. The body is something we have always used in our art, so being able to better represent it allows us to be more dynamic in how we use it. Here's a great example of that. Have you ever looked at films by studios like Disney, DreamWorks, or Sony and seen how their unique characters look and how they move? Well, you can clearly see how these studios are able to stylize their work and make it move, but they need to understand how the body works in order to do so. For example, in many classic Disney films, they had real models for many of the scenes in their movies. Human references are incredibly important in art, even if you aren't drawing in realism, because you need to understand how the body works to make it move correctly. A great example of using a reference is Disney's Goddess of Spring versus Snow White. It is incredibly clear which of these two films had reference footage for it. If you look at the Goddess of Spring, Persephone does not look right at all. She's incredibly floppy and looks almost like a rubber hose cartoon from the Disney shorts that came before her, rather than anything human. But, on the other hand, the dancing scenes in Snow White look beautiful, and she moves very fluidly and expressively through the dance and remains looking human. This is because Disney used actual reference footage to make this scene. They had a frame of reference for how the human body should move in that dance, and were then able to stylize and animate, making a beautiful scene. An amazing, more modern example of the use of and innovation of human reference in art, and specifically animation, is the use of motion and capture systems and CGI. One of the best examples of the use of CGI in motion capture is Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies. You can find many videos of an actor in the motion capture suit, so the animators and CGI artists can see how the human body would move in these complex crawling and climbing movements. The footage and captures from the motion capture system are then used in a CGI program to make Gollum and his movements. For Gollum and his movements, they need an incredibly deep understanding of anatomy, because he moves so very humanly despite not looking like it. A great example of this same need for anatomy for movement in stylization is the Sony films Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. These films are visual masterpieces, partially because of the way they use human form. You see, these movies are filled with web-slinging action and extreme fights and posing, and yet all of the scenes look absolutely gorgeous. These characters in these films have incredibly stylized figures, and yet they still move incredibly human. This movie and Gollum are in a way poster children for not only the improvement of anatomy and art, but also the ways it is applied in art in general. Look at both of these movements and characters compared to that of Persephone. We could see how far animation and art has come due to the understanding of anatomy. Overall, it is very clear to see how the brand new understanding of human anatomy that arose during the Renaissance was able to cause a revolution in the visual arts that can still be seen in and has an incredible importance in the art of today.